Hello, my name is Brian, and these are my group members, Sona, Alicia, and Tuguhi. And this is our legacy project called Another Toilet Down, discussing about vandalism at Montebello High School. Our purpose in creating this presentation is that we believe that the vandalism at Montebello High School is an issue, and it seems like no one's discussing about it. As students, it is our responsibility to make sure the school is presented in a nice and neat order with no vandalism. And this is a reason why we created this presentation, to bring awareness to this issue. Another reason why we created this presentation is that we believe that the time and effort that is being put into cleaning up the vandalism at our school could be used for other things like our classes. When doing this project, we decided to do some research on other schools about how their vandalism affects their school. One of the schools was Shore High School. We found that there's a lot of graffiti on their desks and school walls. Another school we did research on was Garfield High School, and we found out that their bathrooms are littered with drawings of their school mascot. And when they returned back from distant learning, the front of the school read, "Welcome to Purple Hill."
So we started by creating a Google Forms to collect our data. We had two sampling methods. Our first one was emailing the teachers to share the form with the class. It took longer than we expected, so we created a QR code and entered the classrooms to ask the teachers if their students could fill out the form. The QR code made it easier and faster for us to collect data. We did run into some issues where the email technique was slow and teachers weren't responding back. Some students refused to fill out the form or they were having trouble filling out the form. Some people couldn't work the QR code, so it took us longer to get responses. We had three questions. What subjects do you see the most vandalism in? We ended up with the result of math class, which we were surprised by. Where do you find the most vandalism at school? It was the restrooms, which was expected. On a scale from 1 through 5, how severe is vandalism at MHS? And we had an average of 3. Our original data set had 439 responses, which we had to remove 88 responses from because they were not numerical. We ended up with 351 responses. How many times have you heard school workers talk about vandalism? Our mean was 1.57. Our median was 0, our mode was 0, and our standard deviation was 2.82. So we realized that a lot of students haven't heard people talk about vandalism, which is why we're making this presentation. How long does the school take to fix vandalism? Our mean was 21.70, our median was 5, our mode was 7, and our standard deviation was 62.93. So students agreed that it took around 7 days or a week to fix vandalism at school.
So these are histograms, and for our first question, we had what subject do you see the most vandalism in? And it was math, with electives coming in a close second, which was actually kind of shocking to us because we thought if students got to pick their classes, then they would vandalize them less because it was a class that they picked that they wanted to be in. And for our second question, we had where do you find the most vandalism in the school? And almost everyone picked the bathrooms. There wasn't even a close second because we assume there isn't like any supervision in the bathrooms, obviously. For our scalar question, we had how severe do you think the vandalism at MHS is? And most students picked a 3 and some a little higher, which means that the vandalism is at a moderate rate at our school. And this also meant that our data was positively skewed. This is our empirical rule graph, and we had 3 data points that were outliers based on value because they went over our second tier. And for based on location, we had 10 outliers because they went over 22, which was our upper bound, and only one of our tiers didn't pass the empirical rule test.
For our next empirical rule, our question was during your time at MHS, how many times have you heard school workers discussing vandalism in the For the empirical rule, it passed the 68%, which means it fell within one standard deviation of the mean. and it also passed the 95%, so it fell within 2 standard deviations of the mean. However, it did not pass the 99.7%, so it did not fall within 3 standard deviations of the mean. We had 15 outliers based on location and 10 outliers based on. For the box plot, our question was how many days does it take for the school to fix vandalism? And we had an upper bound of 22, a lower bound of -10, and our first quartile was 2, our second quartile was 5, and our third quartile was 10. We had 48 outliers based on location. And for our next box plot, our question was during your time at MHS, how many times have you heard school workers discussing vandalism and its effects? We had an upper bound of 5, a lower bound of -3. Our first quartile was 0, our second quartile was also 0, and our third quartile was 2. We had 15 outliers based on location. So for our solution to vandalism, in our Google form, we had students put how they think school vandalism should be addressed, and these were our top 5 responses. One was having students leave all their things in classroom when they go outside, so they shouldn't take pens and stuff when they go to the restroom. Our second one was offer cleaning vandalism as an alternative to after-school punishments. The third one was having staff members actually talk about vandalism to bring more awareness to it. And our fourth one was have school programs that incentivize a more clean environment. And our fifth one was having activities where students can freely express themselves. Like some of the responses suggested having a board where they could write and express themselves.